Hi guys, it's Bank Holiday Monday, which obviously means it's rained all day, but it has stopped just now, and there's actually blue sky up there, believe it or not. So it'll probably rain again in a minute, but for now, I thought I'd take this opportunity to talk to you about cordylines. So I'm a massive fan of cordylines, mainly probably because they're cheap. I once paid £10 for cordyline, but most of the ones I've bought, and I've probably got 20 or so, were between £1 and £3. The one I bought for £10 actually died. It was the first one I ever bought. I bought it in autumn and it didn't make it through the winter. So lesson number one that I learned was don't buy any tender plant in autumn. It's a rookie error. Always buy in the spring when you've got a full season to get it established, particularly if you're going to put it in the ground. It gives it a much better chance of surviving its first winter and subsequent winters as well. Cordylines are really easy to grow. If you're planting them in the ground, just stick them in. A bit of bone meal or something like that would be great. If not, won't make too much difference, I don't think. Give it plenty of water for its first season whilst its roots get settled. If it gets too cold and too wet as well, then it could get damaged in winter. This one's been in the ground, as has this one, as has that one, for about 6 years, I'd say, and haven't been troubled by the winter at all. But what does happen if they do get damaged, then they will regrow from the base, and sometimes, like this one has, it just does it anyway. This one I actually bought on eBay, and its original trunk sort of is there. Probably ought to take that off actually. Died basically, and this one started growing. I planted it deliberately at an angle. You can see the original trunk. I just planted it sideways, thinking it would resemble a beach in the Caribbean, a picture of paradise. Didn't quite get that effect. I did for a little while, but it just started growing upright really, so probably wouldn't do that again. Wouldn't recommend doing that, because as it gets bigger and bigger, it's just going to be putting more and more weight on the angled trunk. So not sure what's going to happen to that. It may just fall over one day, but obviously I've got this growth coming as well. Now what you can see, if I get close in on this, is that this growth sprouted from the trunk, whereas what you often find is the growth sprouts from the base, from the roots below soil. But yeah, really easy to grow. What you need to do is cut the dead or dying leaves off the plant, and you simply do that with a pair of sharp scissors. You can see here, this is just starting to rain, is the oldest leaf on the plant. It's the lowest down here, and whilst it's nice and green there, it turns a bit yellow, it turns then a bit brown, and past this point here, it's dead. This leaf is done. It's perfectly natural. That's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to turn yellow and then brown, and this will travel, this brownness or the deadness will travel all the way along the leaf back to the center. And at this point, that most of the leaf is dead. I would cut that off. So I will be cutting that off once I get a pair of scissors in my hands. Don't worry about these blue speckles. That's nothing to worry about. That's just a bit of blue paint that my neighbour's my neighbour painted his fence panels, it's sprayed over, so that's nothing, no concern of ill health on the plant. Now, in an ideal world, you know, for optimum conditions for the plant, you would leave this until it was completely brown, because the green represents goodness, and the goodness travels back into the plant itself. But as I say, I'd take it off because it's, you know, looks a bit of a mess. Once you get a substantial amount of brown on the leaf, I would take it off. In terms of soil conditions, lovely blue sky despite it's actually raining at the minute. They would love a well-drained soil. However, they will tolerate virtually anything, I think. I'm on heavy clay here. Obviously this one in a raised bed has got brilliantly well-drained soil, and I've got a nice big plant as a result of that. The ones in the beds are on heavy clay. This one here, which is growing fast, is in a part of the border which is very free draining. So the two cordylines that I've got that are in free draining soil are growing much faster than the ones that are in heavy clay. You get a solitary trunk, and then at some point the plant flowers. And as a reference, this one flowered for the first time last year. So, you know, maybe 2 meters of trunk would be a rough guide of when it would first flower. And it's hard to see, don't know if you can just see there, that it started to form 2 heads. And that almost always happens when it flowers, is that it then branches off and forms 2 heads, and essentially, well, yeah, it forms a branch. So very soon that will be much more noticeable as 2 growth points. At this point it still looks like a main growth point, and then a sort of a subsidiary growing off at the side, but I think over time they will look fairly even in terms of it won't look like a main and a second one, it will just look like 2. I say they almost always do it because the year before this one flowered and it's still just got the 1 growth point, so I'm not quite sure why that's happened, because I thought they always did it, but not in the case of this one. 2 meters of trunk doesn't guarantee it'll flower. This one still hasn't flowered, and it's hard to see there, but it's got a very nice I really can't get the angle there, but it's got a very nice 2 meter trunk yet to flower, and it won't flower this year. It would have done it by now, so maybe next year. But I actually prefer the single trunk, so I'll be glad if it doesn't flower for a number of years yet. You can protect the plants if you want to in the winter. I never bother. You simply grab a load of leaves, as many as you can, more than that. I've got 1 hand to use obviously at the minute, but grab as many as you can and tie them up, and then until you've got all the leaves tied up, then wrap some fleece around it, or you can get like a sort of fleece bag that would go over the top. But you've got to be careful not to, you don't do that in autumn and unveil it in spring, because it encourages rot. So you only do that when it's actually necessary. But for 9 out of 10 winters in 9 out of 10 parts of the UK, you don't need to bother. So I'm not bothering. Worst case scenario, it dies and it starts again from the bottom, or from halfway up the trunk or whatever. Now you can grow cordylines in pots, but only successfully for a few years. After that, the requirements, the water, the nutrient requirements, the soil requirements basically are too much for a pot unless you just go bigger and bigger and bigger. But one day you will have to plant the cordyline out because it will be too big for any pot. It also tends to grow towards the sun, so where I've got it against a wall here, you can see how bent the trunk is. So I will probably be planting this out in the ground quite soon so that it can thrive and go on to grow like my other ones have. In other news, the apple tree's finally in flower. Now, in my very first video, which was probably about a month ago, I said that this was a week away from flowering. So, side note, or note to self, completely disregard any, estimation of time period that I give you, because obviously it's taken a lot longer than a week. It's taken 4 weeks. But it looks great, look at it. Of course, it's gone quite nice now, but it's been chucking it down with rain all day. It's been windy, and there are plenty of, in fact there's, what's on the floor here is full, full sets of blossom, not just little petals that have fallen off, it's the full flower, which is how windy it's been today. I've been for my COVID jab, so my first jab, and I know you're probably wondering how someone so young's managed to get one, but I got myself on a waiting list at a local pharmacy and they rang me up at 4:30 saying they had a spare. So that's my first dose, and that is what I know about cordylines. They're a fantastic plant. Oh, the final thing I'd say is buy them young, because they grow quickly. Well, most of them do. This one hasn't. This one needs digging up and adding to the compost bin, I think, because this is the same age as that one. But it's just, it's much smaller and it doesn't even look healthy. This leaf here, for example, is a fairly new leaf. There's hardly any leaves that aren't damaged. Even the really new ones, they've got brown tips, so I may well dig that up at some point. But yeah, that's all on cordylines. If you've got any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you on the next one.